maybe there's a way in which the relationship between, the difference between eschatology and teleology is structurally like the distinction between earth and world. And then the question becomes, who is it that's able to work that distinction or that difference? Who's able to work in that space? Well, it turns out that, Heidegger says animals are, poor in world. And I think that blackness there's too much going on for it simply to be relegated to the status of the animal, which in some ways would be better, or easier in a certain kind of way. But what's at stake is, but I do think that Heidegger's got these essays on poverty, right? Hart and Negri try to talk about it, but they dismiss it, and they should be thinking it much more, because he's like ahead of them, as hard as it is for, what I'm saying? It's not that he's not what he is, it's just that he is what he is, which is a bad one, in a way that they don't quite get to, because what's at stake is something like, this has to do, there's a theological sort of component to this. What's at stake is to think through the distinction between the ones who are poor in the world, let's say, and the ones who are poor in the world. The ones whose access to world is precisely the hallmark of their poverty. So when I was talking about Frank's work in terms of a preferential option for blackness, it's always echoing the phrase of a preferential option for the poor. Right? It's a sort of liberation theological thing, which for me is it's a theology which is in some sense, part of the reason why I know I'm rambling now, and I'm sorry, but part of the reason why this is a theology which was always so subject to repression, right, by church authority, is I think because it was distancing, because it was making a certain kind of a set of theological and sociological formulations to distance the theological from the teleological. Okay? This is something you can see like in, Gutierrez or Dussel, all these people. So part of what's at stake is to continually tease out the difference between earth and world, between maybe what we would say between disruption or eruption, okay, and end, where end is not only bound up with, the belief or the continuing sort of obsession with a certain kind of revelatory event, but also, I think that this is also something which is very important, like in Benjamin's work, right? That footnote in the Critique of Violence. Remember that? Just that little footnote where he just messes with Kant, just like as an aside, right? It's like, well, there's really no reason, right, to accept the categorical imperative. Right? It's like this totally powerful, disruptive moment, because what it is it's a disruption of a teleological, of a discourse of ends. Right? But of course, the terrible weight of acting out the potentiality of such a moment is precisely visited upon the ones who have had to suffer the experience of being conceived of as means. Right? This is to me the importance of this notion of fantasy in the whole, of remaining in the whole of the ship. Because it's basically like, it's horrible, it's terrible, it's unspeakable, you can't calculate it. You see what I'm trying to say? There's no, however bad, there's no possible way to talk about how bad it is. There's no way. There's no language that's adequate to the brutality. Brutality ain't adequate to the brutality, okay? And what makes it even worse is that these spaces of dereliction, of abandonment, of brutality, of violence, are the repositories for what remains of our chances to live some other kind of way. That's what makes it both. And again, and what you're left with as a function is this task, which is horrible, of deciding and of coming, of literally deciding to recognize this horror and brutality as cause for celebration. It's not, the celebration doesn't come as a function of some Pollyanna-ish attempt to make it seem better than it is, or but look at this beautiful music we made. No, the celebration comes precisely when you have understood the depth and the profundity, okay, of the abandonment, and recognize the double edge of that term precisely. At which point, and recognizing that this is already here, that this radical set of chances and eruptive possibilities, I don't even like that word, but all of the eruptive chances that occur as a function of this exhausted life, this life in and of exhaustion, are present in something other than what is generally recognized as the world. So that the end of the world is an imprecise term that I would want to use to describe a certain alternative. The presence of the alternative is probably a better phrase than the end of the world.
Well, good place to wrap up for the night. Thank you.